All right, so we got all the basic basing on these guys. So now we're going to apply the ballast. We're going to set that aside to dry overnight. Once that's done, we're going to apply our varnish, and then we'll wrap up the session with those eyes like we wanted to do earlier today. Just trying to make some room here.
My name is Rhapsody. Welcome back to Enter that guard. Gets the enemy that's already taking the poison to take more. Or rather, the bleed to Oh, bad crit. Bad crit. Unfortunately, that party ordering has prevented me from killing the Crazed Nasher. We'll try and stun Backliner, and it works out. Oh. Unfortunately, this Crazed Nasher has another action left in them.
Confidence surges as the enemy crumbles.
120 versus 140. Chance to stun. I'm definitely stunning the frontliner at least. Hey, it worked. Okay, 20% chance and it hit. All right. Feeling pretty good about that. Oh, yes, Blight and Giant is taking a ridiculous amount of damage right here. I will go for the party heal myself, though. No crit? What? Really? I didn't even know it was possible for me not to crit. 170 means we definitely can't stun in the game, though. We can crit him, though.
Press this advantage. Give them no quarter.
Unfortunately, we are 5 damage short of the kill. So if I didn't do the party heal, I actually would have gotten it if I didn't do the party heal. Whoops. Enemy acts super slowly, so we're just going to take a recovery round.
But never hidden.
Get him!
Monster's size has no intrinsic
Killed him for some
merit
stress healing.
unless inordinate exsanguination be considered a virtue.
The torch, so we can start another stack of gold. I'm probably coming back this way, so...
Nature herself, a victim to the spreading corruption.
Ah, Collector!
His intent.
What's up, Rhapsodic Horder? Let's fight. Now, I definitely got to yell at you in the first round. It's crit. It's not a crit. It's a high roll in the damage, but it's not a crit. That's a crit, but on the wrong character, unfortunately. This is why the Battle Ballad is probably the one that I wanted to shovel in, by the way, instead of what we ended up shoveling in that I can't remember. Stun chance is 20% hit. No, I'm going to roll it. Just going to roll the damage. It sucked to basically pass that turn. Could be worse. Could be better. Could be worse. Alright, we're definitely yorping them both. Yorp. Undoes that dart. Gets the enemy that's already taken the poison to take more. Or rather, the bleed to take more before they get their next action out. Steal it. Dodge. No. Crit. Oh, worse than a dodge. Sunday collected highwayman. No actions for anyone. Damn it. What a rain. Bunch of bleed back on the back line. They're gonna need it.
As the fiend falls, a faint hope blossoms.
Collect coal. No. Some stress we didn't need. It's fine. It's fine. We'll stun the back line up.
The way is lit.
Or, we'll give it a God's honest
Require
attempt.
only the strength to follow it.
We're just going to chunk in the damage here. Hopefully we get a action on our flagellant before. It's not nice. Yay! Before the collector takes a action. That's what I wanted. And stress heal the person who needs it the most. Definitely sub in Battle Ballad, by the way. It's fine.
The ghoulish collection scatters. The rats prepare to feast.
I think it's probably now time to get rid of the holy water. And definitely now time to make that substitution.
Obliterated.
I mean, I could stun two, or I could just straight up murder one.
A devastating blow.
These two frontliners are guaranteed to only ever have one action in this fight. I think I let them do that. Yeah, I mean, not always guaranteed to result in a great success, but helps out my action economy a lot. Beautiful. And then two of them just bled to death. Hey, that's exactly what I was hoping. That we'd be able to set up for the lethal without having to do anything. Hey, and then this one's definitely a party heal. Self buff. Hell yeah, get buff. Take that bleed off of you also. Yeah, we're getting a lot of actions out before this crazy Nasher. If I can also get the vessel, I'm so pleased. The vessel is the one I wanted the most.
This expedition at least promises success.
Alright. It's up against a stack of gold. It's difficult to win that point. It gets, we've got 2 more shelters left. Not even great loot to go on the way back.
Annihilated.
Unfortunately, I think this last Crazy Masher is going to be entirely up to... Oh! Now, great work. And you know what? I'm also going to roll this thing. There we go. So it's just the big boy that I got to deal with now. It's not bad. Rend for nothing. And we probably get to open with a stun. Beautiful. Alright, this should now pretty much be entirely a walkover. One of these walks of the caked variety.
Masterfully executed.
The enemies are already... Yeah, you're already dead. So, stress healing time. Oh, we got the heal 4 stress. Oh my gosh. What an effort.
A victory. Perhaps a turning point.
Would like to take more money. It's going to be slightly more money than the heavy boots, and I'm not even going to sell the heavy boots. So now I get to kill the outlaw cutthroat and start working on the Fusilier early.
Buddy.
I'm not sure if you said it just joking around, but I think you mentioned that building a YouTube channel can kind of make you go insane. Why do you say that?
Building a YouTube channel. I mean, I think in order to put yourself on camera, to have talking points, to operate the camera, to operate the audio, to field questions, to get rid of, to block out all of the bad comments, to bring up and reinforce the good comments. I think you have to be a special kind of sociopath. Truthfully, I mean, it's a lot of work for one person to do. It's definitely helpful if you have a wife that's involved, or a family member, or friends, or a group of other YouTubers that are like in the mix with you. I definitely think that's helpful. But for one person, a one-man band to do it, it's a Herculean effort. And it normally means that you're cutting out all forms of like social life. So thank God for my wife. She lets me just, she believes in it. She's trusting it. So she's letting me go, full speed at it. But, at the extent of my own sanity sometimes, of not having a social life, and, feeling like a little bit of a prisoner of my own success.
Do you think views and social media likes equate with happiness?
I think, yeah, that's a slippery slope. When I first got into this, what I wanted the most was to give people a sense of shock or wonder in the videos, to leave them with a lasting impression. And I think it's inevitable that you end up comparing yourself. You end up comparing yourself to your last videos, and you sort of get sucked into this game of working for the views and panhandling for views and comments. It's just part of the mix. There's no way to separate it. As much as I try and as much as I want to, I have to like spend an enormous amount of time kind of brainwashing myself that like that is not important, even though it has an enormous weight. It's tough.
Do you think you would have started a few years back if you had known not just the pressure of putting out something that your audience will like and top the last one, but also your own expectations?
What's crazy is that, I do kind of wish I started earlier. I think it would have been easier for me. I would have had more free time. I would have had a little bit more energy, that kind of thing. But if I look back in the last 2 years of just my technical skills, they have ballooned in that short 2 years of having a YouTube channel. The amount that I've learned and packed in there is exponential to the first 2 years that I had. So putting yourself under deadline and putting yourself under public scrutiny and putting up bodies of work to be judged, it's a whole process of whittling down your skills and really, really refining your talent and just sharpening that blade. So sure, I wish I would have started years before, but I also think that I would have had less to offer. And I think that I might not have put so much into it as I am now. Maybe that's something that when you get older, you start doing. I don't know.
But do you think you would have
Oh my God,
actually gone for it, knowing how difficult it is, and it is very isolating, and people don't realize that about the job, quote unquote?
I don't know that I would. I think it's one of those things where you kind of get sucked in, and so when people look at the channel and they look at the amount of work that I put into certain videos,
We kind of touched on this earlier, but how have your expectations of the business changed since going to NYU, Tisch, being a filmmaker, this sort of journey that you've had? How have your expectations of making films and pleasing the audience changed?
The whole process of making films has kind of been what I thought. I know it'd always be challenging. I think you have this idea that once, I think anybody in any careers, especially in entertainment, there's never like, I made it. There's always going to be more challenges. Like you're always scrapping to get your next movie. You always set the bar higher. You don't want to do more of what you did. So I think the one thing that surprised me that you're always working hard to get your next movie. And the other part that I think is a weird thing that's gotten worse, I think it goes back to the internet. I don't think film critics should be film critics. I think they should be film enthusiasts. And I don't think the setup of the job right now is they feel like they have to critique and say what's wrong. I think we'd all benefit more if it was a film enthusiast and they would look for films that you need to see. Because all the ones that are popular and commercial, honestly, I don't even look at the tomato rating. My movies don't always get reviewed very well. People seem to be, they don't like Adam or they do like Adam. That doesn't help. I look at the audience response, if anything. You know, I'd rather call somebody I know that saw the movie. But I think the audiences leaving theaters saying what they thought is a more accurate gauge if a movie's good. I think it's weird how critics will feel like there's certain movies they have to like and they don't like, and if they weren't critics and they're film enthusiasts, their job would be great because they would list a bunch of movies that we all need to see. Right now, there's probably 10 movies that aren't going to get a whole lot of press, and they're probably really some good ones. And I would rather read an article and like, oh fuck, I'm going to go see that movie because that filmmaker would never have seen. So I just wish it was more like that. When you go back to there's a Kaiju cinema. It was Truffaut and Godard, the New Wave. They all they were filmmakers reviewing other movies, and it was much more about embracing what they liked and less about taking pop shots at. You know, if you don't like a movie too, I also think if I was a reviewer, I'd be like, look, if you like action movies that do this, this, and this, you're going to be happy. But I think reviews are generally just you know, trying to cut it down, or they just decide, okay, we're going to like this movie and say we like this movie. You know, it's funny, like when The Waterboy came out, they talked about how sophomoric it was and how there were so many fart jokes. And I was like, there's not a fart joke in The Waterboy. You can say sophomoric. That's not your opinion. And at the time, the Farrelly brothers did the Kingpin, and they embraced it, which was a really funny, great movie. But I mean, that one had fisting bulls and like they had full on shit. So it's like it's not an honest, you know, it's not an honest system. So I think there should be film enthusiasts. And so when you ask me about the filmmaking, that's one of the things that disappoints me. And yeah, and that you have to always fight to get your next movie or work really hard to get the next one.
Do you think the same way with social media and we're outing people and we're putting our thoughts out there, there's a power in trying to take things down?
There's definitely a negativity that seems to excel. And I don't know how we have to reinvent it, but I guess it starts with each and every person. And, you know, listen, as an artist, that's what I'm going to try to make people. As long as you have integrity, as long as everything goes back to integrity. If you have integrity, you're not going to take a pop shot at somebody, and you're going to give a balanced argument. I don't like this for this reason, but you might like it. You know, if people are more fair, I think we'll be okay. It's that lack of seeing the person's face that you're picking on that the internet does that causes it. You know, Louis C.K. did a whole thing about how he doesn't want his kids to have a phone because when you're a kid, your tendency is to punch a kid in the face. And then the kid starts crying, and then you realize, oh, I feel bad, and then you form empathy. But on a phone, you punch a kid in the face by saying something mean, but you never get that response. So it's that lack of being able to form empathy that's missing with the internet. I don't want to take technology away. I just want us to elevate ourselves and be better people to be able to handle our choice.
Do you think most film critics should have gone to film school? I mean, I'm not sure the background. I haven't done research.
I have a nice feeling, and I don't know, sound like. I feel like a lot of them went to film school and they just didn't apply themselves to make movies. And so there's a frustration. I'm not everybody. There's some people that just love films But the feeling I get, is that, it's sometimes I'll write back to a film critic in a very not angry. I'll always be like, oh, there's somebody who wrote something about Blended, and I was like, well, my intentions weren't that. And I in a very straightforward way, I was like, I tried to make something that wasn't typical. I wanted to make two people falling in love over parenthood. And then the guy wrote back like, I forgot that directors are human beings. It was such a great feeling. I was like, because I'm like, I felt really bad because Blended. By the way, people love that movie. Kids love that movie, and it was one of the few times that the critics, they don't usually bother me, but there's 3 amazing kids in that movie. That or more. There's 1, 2, 3. There's 5 kids in the movie, and they loved the movie. They loved making it. And they loved the premiere, and they saw the people laughing and loving the movie, and they couldn't wait for the reviews. And I was thinking, oh, these poor kids are going to get their hearts crushed, and they did, and they were just like, they couldn't believe that the movie got shredded, to pieces. And I don't know, like Rotten Tomatoes, probably like 15 or something, and it's not fair. Like that movie is not. I don't care what you say, that movie compared to a bunch of other movies that got higher ratings, it delivered on what it was supposed to do. And so it bugs me when like people that are critics are just so easy to be like that, this movie's predictable and this is that and that, that kind of thing. But even the great critics do it. If Siskel and Ebert is really funny. If you go back to the Waterboy interview that might be online, Ebert was like, he kind of gave it like this movie was not great, or sophomore, and then Siskel goes, I can't believe you. And I go, oh my God, he's going to like the movie? He goes, how did you even watch it? And I go, well, that just says exactly what's wrong. Like, you can't say that. You can't go in that bias.
Wow.
So it's not always fair. But for me, what matters is how people feel. And the ultimate validation for me is, my movies are on TV for 20 years, and they run over and over and over. And I can't say that about a lot of the other movies that came out those years. So in the long run, that's what matters. I'm like, I don't know. I can't guarantee a movie's going to get reviewed well. I can't even guarantee it's going to, make a lot of money. I just know I'm going to make a movie that's going to be emotionally honest. It's going to be a story that I think is important, and it will probably have a shelf life. It's a Wonderful Life was the reason I wanted to make movies, and my parents were, they're in their 80s, so they're like, oh my God, that movie bombed when it came out because it was depressing. It came out after the war. And then I was like, oh my God, this is like the classic of all classics. And I was like, I always go to that, like, oh good, the movies don't have to do well when they come out, they have to do well over time. And that's the true test.
Because in a feature film, you can have a 4-hour movie, and the last 5 minutes can let it down, and then for the audience, the whole experience gets thrown out the window. It's like the end of an anecdote or the punchline to a joke. Like it justifies everything you've seen. So I always come up with the ending early on. Well, I think people who've seen my other films, they're going to see things in this film that they've been playing around with for 20 years. The idea of a bullet jumping out of the wall and going back into the gun. But I think the longest I was stuck was on Inception. I got to page 80 or so. I had 2 acts of it, and I was stuck for about 10 years or so. I've been working specifically with the spy genre, with how to incorporate these ideas into that genre for about 6 years now, specifically on Tenet. We were looking for an aspect of selflessness to the character that, in a previous spy fiction, it's really a genre thing. You have these very cynical, hard-bitten protagonists. And it's a little bit at odds with the concept of somebody who, in story terms, is willing to give up their life for their fellow human being.
If there's something wrong with the third act, it's actually wrong with the first and second act. That's where you really need to do the work. I have always found that to be true.
So talk to me about how long this took to come to pass. Like, I've read somewhere it was a decade in your mind, this idea of Tenet.
Well, I think, people who've seen my other films, they're going to see things in this film that they've been playing around with for 20 years. The idea of a bullet jumping out of the wall and going back into the gun. I mean, it's there metaphorically in Memento, right back there. These are images and ideas I've been fascinated by and looking to synthesize into a form where it's not structural, it's not metaphorical, it's real. It's what the character is actually dealing with. It's concrete reality. And that's taken me a long time. I've been working specifically with the spy genre and with how to incorporate these ideas into that genre for about 6 years now, specifically on Tenet. So it's taken a while. It's a lot of thinking that's gone into it, but it's been a fun ride.
You said that Tenet brought things that you had been thinking about for at least 20 years. What was the moment you realized that the script was ready to shoot?
Well, it was more a question of the moment I realized that the set of ideas was ready to commit to the page in screenplay form. I won't sit down to write something until I kind of know that I'm ready to, and that the ideas are all in balance. And that can take a very long time. I'm not somebody who does a lot of multiple drafts over the years. I tend to just take notes and draw diagrams and think about concepts and sort of think about, okay, how could you apply that to different forms of storytelling? What might the screenplay be? But once I've kind of focused in on that set of ideas and I know I'm ready to put it into screenplay form, that's sort of the big leap for me. And then the screenplay is the sort of jumping off point for the execution of, how you're actually going to go and make it.
So I remember reading at one point that you had sort of done, I think, the first 2 acts, and then Nathan, you sort of talked about it, and you were like, then you're going to go into the 3rd act. Like, how do you sort of tend to write the script? You sort of go through one pass?
I go through linearly. So I write the script, from the first frame to the last frame, and I tend to build up the drafts as I go. So I tend to rewrite, as I add a scene, I'll very often go right back to the beginning of this script and rewrite through and then add the next scene, and sort of layer it that way. Every writer's different. Everybody does it differently. That process works for me because I've done so much planning before I write the screenplay.
Right.
So I know
where you're going.
I know where I'm going in the sense of the narrative movements, the narrative ideas. But yeah, I sort of rewrite as I go. And every now and again, and this is one of the only times I had to do, I had to involve Nathan at an early stage in a design sense. So I only got 2/3 of the way through. So I made him read that, which was a bit unfair. And then, carried on, and a month later or something, I showed him the whole thing.
A simple question, but how did you select the title Tenet? And I'm curious sort of in the name, but also in your creative process, like the name of the movie, when does that come to you? Is it early or late?
I usually have an idea early on, sometimes a long time before. In the case of Tenet, I had the title very early, years ago. And obviously the fact that it's a palindrome, was the sort of jumping off point, but it was also what the word means. It's the notion of belief.
All I have for you is a gesture, a combination with a word, Tenet.
And for those who've seen the film, I'm going to try to be reasonably spoiler-free, but because a lot of people are just getting the opportunity to see the film now. But for me, when you watch the film, there's a sense in which we're addressing the idea that we're all sort of imprisoned in a way in our own views of the passage of time, of what's going on in the world and all the rest. And so there is this kind of leap of faith to the idea of an objective reality. So there's the idea of belief or faith involved with what these characters are choosing to invest in terms of what's really going on in the story. And that was always an intriguing idea to me, and I wanted to be right, up front on screen.
The protagonist, John David Washington's character, a lot of people have been wondering why he decided to hide or not go into his background. We know very little of his past. What did he do before becoming a spy? I know we're going to get an answer to that. But
No. The point is to not answer that. Yeah. I really wanted to tap into that kind of great tradition of the anonymous protagonist. For me, it dates back to the TV show The Prisoner, for example, where he's known by a number, or the number he resists, number 6, known as the prisoner. But also, I was thinking a lot of Sergio Leone westerns, like with Clint Eastwood's, The Man with No Name, all the rest. I think there's something really compelling about jumping into a story and being told essentially to concentrate on the here and now, to pass through this experience in the present tense. Ironically, it's a film that deals with time, but it's really important as you watch the film that you're just kind of looking over this guy's shoulder and going with him. It's a very present tense presence in the film. And so deliberately not naming him, not including any of the information about how you might have arrived there, I think hopefully draws attention to that idea and keeps people really focused on the here and now. Obviously, John David and my discussions with John David, we had to, have some sense. He really needed to have a sense of who this guy was and where he'd come from, but we really didn't want that specified in the movie.
I see. So you developed some of that, kind of in your head, and John does a little bit of that, but you're not exposing it to the audience.
Yeah, we weren't massively pedantic about it. We weren't going through, who his parents were and where he was born and all the rest. But we needed to have a sense. He needed some guidance from me of, what's this guy's background. Some of which is loosely indicated in the script.
Yeah.
The jumping off point for the film is clearly, working, the Secret Service organization, probably the CIA, that and so forth. But we talked about the fact that, for example, he clearly has a lot of military training and that kind of thing. But we didn't want to specify any of that for the audience. But the actor needs to know the underlying truth of the character to make it a consistent characterization.
With the protagonist, John David and I talked about this character having an aspect of, we were not in any way specific to religion, Christianity, but in almost sort of spiritual terms, we talked about needing to have faith, and the title of the film has that aspect to it. And that was very much a sort of a subconscious thing, really, that I think both of us, as we approach material, we talk about what to do with it, we were looking for an aspect of selflessness to the character that in previous spy fiction, and it's really a genre thing, you have these very cynical, hard-bitten protagonists. And it's a little bit at odds with the concept of somebody who, in story terms, is willing to give up their life for their fellow human beings. And so we were interested in looking at it in a slightly different way and thinking that there must be a self.
Yeah, it's okay.
This week, I excitedly continued my Torment build. It was a choice between a bunch of smaller scatter pieces or one big dramatic centerpiece. And well, I decided to go with the one big centerpiece. I started by getting some fresh silicone to mold those beautiful Greco-Roman style pillars that would be the thematic backbone of this entire set. Thankfully, this time around, the silicone was fine and I was able to make really nice usable molds. I spent the weekend beforehand casting as many pieces as I could with plaster. I also broke out some of my tile molds that I'd made last year for my Frostgrave boards to act as dump molds. These are from my original sculpts and they're a great way to pour out excess plaster to create pieces of brick that I could break up later to use as pavers or even wall sections. This was actually my first time using plaster to cast with. Usually I work with resin, but the plaster seemed far more appropriate as I'd be able to easily break it up as needed. The other prep work I did in advance was printing out an epic model from this week's sponsor, and boy oh boy, it's a perfect centerpiece. As luck would have it, Archvillain's theme this month is Epic Demons, so how perfectly fitting for my Hellscape build. Every model in this set is a massive sized demon, and I chose this rock model, which is by far the biggest piece I've ever printed. This model is so damn cool, and I was thrilled that all parts printed and assembled with no issue. Even the base is amazing. Like, normally I'd sculpt my own base, but I loved all the little candle details that were decorating this one, and I knew it would be a perfect thematic fit for this piece. With Big Daddy Demon Boy all printed up and a bunch of plaster pieces cast and ready, I could start thinking about the layout for this grand piece. And this was pretty easy and organic. The pillars just seemed to want to surround the demon in a sort of shrine. This is a character model meant to be used as a playable creature, but damn if it won't make one hell of a beautiful monument. I figured I'd need about a 12-inch circle base for this, which is easily the biggest base I've ever made or used for scatter terrain. So I grabbed some 1/4-inch MDF and went out and cut out a circle and sanded the edges to a nice smooth bevel. The nice thing about a big circle like this in a very stable material like MDF is that there would be little to no risk of it warping. Now, as cool as this model's base was, I didn't think it was quite tall enough for the epic scale I was going for here. I wanted it to tower over the piece and models on the battlefield. So I grabbed some thick XPS foam and got to work carving up a larger rock for it to stand on. I only needed to get a rough shape here as I knew I'd be covering everything in Sculptamold shortly. Sculptamold seemed to be in very short supply and hard to get this past year where I live. So I'm really thankful that a kind viewer from Wisconsin sent me up a care package a couple months ago of several pounds of the stuff, allowing me to jump into a big set like this without worrying about wasting it. So if you're watching, James, thanks again. It's going to your really good use. After gluing the foam and the model with some of that really good glue from Geek Gaming, I got to work covering the rock in Sculptamold. I was really tempted to cover the entire base and set the pillars out right at this point, but I knew that would be a bad idea. The thing about Sculptamold is that it's really tricky to sculpt into hard-edge, rock-like shapes when it's first applied. It's just too soft. The trick is that you have to let it sit and cure for a bit and find that sweet spot where it's mostly stiffened up but can still be worked with tools before fully hardening. For this reason, I knew I couldn't put those pillars in place as they would just be in my way as I tried to sculpt that rock. What I could do at this point was cover some of the base areas with Sculptamold and some of those broken bits of stone flooring and plaster that I had prepared. Once the time was right and the Sculptamold was ready, I used a damp popsicle stick to carve in some more realistic rock shapes that would better blend with the printed base. And then I could get to the exciting part and start laying out all the pillars and various bits of decoration. I really love working with Sculptamold as a foundation like this because you can just push big things into it and they bond really well without any extra glue. For some smaller rubble, I use some decorative broken glass that you can get from IKEA. This is meant to go in like flower vases or something, but it works great for rubble. And I just pushed it into the Sculptamold. I wasn't confident that these little pieces would all bond well without any extra glue, but I wanted to test it out just to see. I could then get to work dropping on some various pieces of weapons and items to decorate this hellish battlefield. Now, some people were wondering on last week's video where all these bits are from. Where did I get all these bits? Well, they're from all sorts of different places. They're really just various pieces from different minis and kits that I've randomly collected over the years. Some of them are from big model sets I bought and never used, and many are from boxes of just random stuff that friends or viewers have given me over the history of this channel. This is all stuff that's just been sitting and waiting to be used, but for some reason I've always been reluctant to cut this stuff up and use it just as bits. Always felt like I needed to save them until the time I could just assemble and paint the models the way they were intended. But with this project, that mindset has all changed. It's been really liberating to no longer feel that reservation about packing up things that have just been sitting in dark boxes for ages. They may never end up being the completed models that they were intended to be, but this way they'll all be given a life on the gaming table and given a chance to fulfill some sort of gaming destiny nonetheless. The next day, when everything was dry and cured, I gazed upon this piece and I was incredibly proud of it. The only issue is that a lot of that little rubble that I didn't glue wasn't quite stuck very well. But as I said, it was a test, and I simply removed and...
Okay. So that's pretty good. I'm going to pause and come back. I got to start dinner and I'll be back.